that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you are dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin, here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com. And WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Happy to be with you. So, Trump dances with the Swamp Queen, and that, of course, would be Nancy Pelosi. You would think after a while that people who don't like being publicly embarrassed would leave Donald Trump alone, because Donald Trump has no chill. You cannot embarrass Donald Trump, and he will find a way to embarrass you. But some people don't believe that fat meat is greasy, and that would include the current Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. On the 17th of January, Nancy Pelosi sent a letter, on the 16th of January, Nancy Pelosi sent a letter to the President regarding the State of the Union speech. It reads, Mr. President, dear Mr. President, on January 3rd, it was my privilege as Speaker to invite you to deliver the State of the Union address on January 29th. The Constitution calls for the President to, from time to time, give to the Congress information of the State of the Union. During the 19th century and up until the presidency of Woodrow Wilson, these annual addresses, these annual State of the Union messages were delivered to the Congress in writing. And since the start of the modern budgeting in fiscal year 1977, the State of the Union address has never been delivered during a government shutdown. And now you know what this is all about. In September 2018, Secretary Nielsen designated State of the Union addresses as national special security events, recognizing the need for the full resources of the federal government to be brought to bear to ensure the security of these events. The extraordinary demands presented by the NSSEs require weeks of detailed planning, with dozens of agencies working together to prepare for the safety of all participants. The U.S. Secret Service was designated as the lead federal agency responsible for coordinating, planning, exercising, and implementing security for the national special security events by Public Law 106-554, December 19, 2000. However, both the U.S. Secret Service and the Department of Homeland Security have not been funded for 26 days now, with critical departments hamstrung by furloughs. Sadly, given the security concerns, and unless government reopens this week, I suggest that we work together to determine another suitable date after government has reopened for this address, or for you to consider delivering your State of the Union address in writing to the Congress on January 29th. Thank you for your attention to this matter. That was her bit. Was this a power play? Of course it was. Of course it was. This is basically Nancy Pelosi trying to put the pressure on the president and also publicly embarrass him by saying, I know you love the spotlight, I know you want attention, and now I'm going to take that attention from you. It also, of course, is taking away from him a platform, because the problem that Nancy Pelosi has is you can't let Donald Trump speak directly to the public, because then he tends to be very effective even with his unique manner of speaking. You may remember during the meeting in the Oval Office with her and Chuck Schumer and the president, where it got into a very, very animated back and forth where she embarrassed herself terribly, and the president acquitted himself quite well, telling both of them, look, I know what's going to happen. And if we're going to shut the government down, if it makes you feel better, if that's what you want to do, fine. I'll take credit for it. I'll take the blame for it. Shut the government down. I will shut the government down for border security. He did. And he hasn't backed away from anything. Now, do you really think that Nancy Pelosi wants to sit behind Donald Trump for however long it takes for him to deliver a State of the Union address, an hour, 45 minutes, whatever it takes, and to basically deliver his State of the Union address without rebuttal, without interruption during that entire time to the American people, with her sitting in silence over his shoulder? I don't think she wants to do that. Nevertheless, she sent that letter. Now, in the aftermath of that letter, both the Department of Homeland Security and the Secret Service have said, we don't have a problem with security. So she had to back up and change her tune. That's what she had to do. And she ended up doing that on the 17th because the response to her letter to the president was pretty swift. So on the 17th of January, she went into a relatively rambling change of defense for why she needed to see the State of the Union delayed.
This senseless shutdown is inflicting great pain in every part of our country. Every day the impact spread, reaching the lives of hardworking Americans in every corner of the country. These are the people who deliver services to the American people. We should respect what they do for our country. I'm not denying a platform at all. We're saying let's get a date when government is open. Let's pay the employees. Maybe he thinks it's okay not to pay people who do work. I don't. And my caucus doesn't either. I have no doubt that our men and women in the federal workforce have the capability to protect. The inference that they want to say is, oh, you don't think they can? Yes, they can. They're professionals. They trained for this. They should be paid for this. 90% of the drugs coming over the border come through the ports of entry. And so we have said again and again, let's build the infrastructure of the ports of entry and maybe increase them. Let's facilitate trade and travel and protecting our security with more lateral roads there. Let's increase the personnel. There are nearly 3,000, imagine, 3,000 vacancies in customs. Let's increase the personnel, infrastructure personnel, technology.
So now it's all about the people who aren't getting paid. Now, of course, Nancy Pelosi could have introduced in legislation in the House of Representatives that did nothing other than pay those who are not currently receiving paychecks. She could have done that at any time. And I'm fairly certain that Chuck Schumer would go along with that. And if they put that on the president's desk, they could put the onus on him, because I don't think there's anybody in Congress who's going to say we shouldn't pay these people who are either furloughed or, worse yet, showing up to work without pay. I think he would say we should pay them, and I think Donald Trump would do the same. And you would not have to give him any money for the border wall, but the government would still remain closed. The issue is not whether or not anyone gets paid, it's whether or not it gets open, because the only thing the Democrats care about is an open government. Let's not get this twisted. Now, Donald Trump responded to this, as you know, for those of you who understand that he would. He didn't waste any time making it clear that that this was not going to stand. You do not try to embarrass Donald Trump and think he's not going to hit you. Let's recall this. 16 Republicans tried to embarrass Donald Trump and keep him from the nomination when nobody thought he had a snowball's chance of getting it. Who got nominated? Sea-hag Hillary Clinton thought she could embarrass Donald Trump because of his lack of experience and her being touted by Barack Obama, no less, as the most qualified person ever to seek the presidency. Right now, her $20 book is selling for 98 cents at Costco. And he has delivered on his promises since being elected, with the exception of this one. Well, not totally gone, but if you really think that you can embarrass Donald Trump and not get hit in return, if you can swing and miss at Donald Trump. If he swings, he's going to connect. And he did on Friday the 18th with respect to a nice little trip that Nancy was planning during the shutdown.
Today marks day 28 of the government shutdown, with talks at a complete standstill. It is now a war of retaliation between the president and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. After she suggested he postpone the State of the Union, he abruptly canceled her trip to Afghanistan on a military plane. Chief White House correspondent Jonathan Karl has more from Washington. John, this morning, one newspaper headline says Washington is a sandbox where the adults need a timeout.
Cecilia, if we haven't already reached it, now we have reached the point of absurdity with this government shutdown. The president waited until Democratic lawmakers had already boarded the bus to leave Capitol Hill before calling off their trip. This, of course, coming after Nancy Pelosi made the extraordinary step of calling for the president to postpone or perhaps not even give at all his State of the Union address, an address that is scheduled for a week from Tuesday. In a measure of the frustration here, Lindsey Graham, Republican senator and perhaps the president's closest ally in the Senate, said both sides deserve blame. He said one sophomoric response does not deserve another. Speaker Pelosi's threat to cancel the State of the Union is very irresponsible and blatantly political. President Trump denying Speaker Pelosi military travel to visit troops in Afghanistan and our allies in Egypt and NATO is also inappropriate. Meanwhile, there is absolutely no negotiating going on. The president is not budging, and Democrats are saying they won't even talk about his central demand for a wall until he reopens the government, openly comparing him to a young child. As one Democratic senator put it, you don't hand them that cookie or candy when they are screaming, because then you're going to be doing that until they are 18 years old. Cecilia?
Yeah, neither side is at the table at this point. What are you hearing from your sources there at the White House, John? Is the State of the Union going to happen on the 29th? Is that possible?
Well, you talk to Democrats on the Hill, they say, no way, it's not going to happen. Meanwhile, they haven't even responded to Nancy Pelosi on that here, and they are proceeding as if it were going to happen, but I would not count on it, Cecilia.
All right, John, thank you.
Let's be clear about something. Donald Trump is winning this exchange just on that because you basically stepped into where he lives. Why you would do that is beyond me. On the 17th of January, the day after Nancy sent her letter, the White House responded, "Dear Madam Speaker, due to the shutdown, I am sorry to inform you that your trip to Brussels, Egypt, and Afghanistan has been postponed. We will reschedule this 7-day excursion when the shutdown is over. In light of the 800,000 great American workers not receiving pay, I am sure you would agree that postponing this public relations event is totally appropriate. I also feel that during this period it would be better if you were in Washington negotiating with me and joining the strong border security movement to end the shutdown. Obviously, if you would like to make your journey by flying commercial, that would certainly be your prerogative. I look forward to seeing you soon, and even more forward to watching our open and dangerous southern border finally receive the attention, funding, and security it so desperately deserves. Sincerely, Donald Trump." You got to remember, when Donald Trump hits, it's not a one. You jab at Donald Trump and you get the two-piece coming back. What do I mean? Washington Times report on the 18th of January. The Trump administration has barred all federally authorized aircraft from transporting congressional delegations during the partial government shutdown unless given a special exemption by the White House. Nobody from Congress is going anywhere. Here's what it came down to. Under no circumstances during a government shutdown will any government-owned, rented, leased, or chartered aircraft support any congressional delegation without the express written approval of the White House Chief of Staff. The first hit, the jab, was the letter. The follow-up cross was banning everybody. No, it's not just Nancy Pelosi. Nobody in Congress gets on a federal aircraft during a shutdown. Guys, let me break this down to you. This is not, despite what you may believe, this is not about the stuff that you're hearing. This isn't about the State of the Union address. It isn't about Nancy Pelosi flying. It's not even really about the people not working, although in some ways it should be. It's about the wall. It's not about speeches or trips. There's also the fact that the American people don't care about the shutdown. The press and Congress care about the shutdown. You can go out there and look at polls if you're willing to dig. It's not hard to find where you'll see, you know what? Most of the people aren't even paying attention to the shutdown. It doesn't affect them. Way more than half. Way more than half. It just doesn't. And that's what people are missing. This is basically a tempest in a teapot, and all you have to do is turn off the TV and radio and some parts of social media, and America is doing just fine with 25% less federal government. That's just the way it is. Congress could pay back these wages at any time, and they haven't. They could have a bill on the president's desk by Tuesday and have it signed the same day. If they really wanted to, they could get it through today and have him sign it tomorrow. It doesn't matter. They don't want that. What they want is to be able to kill the idea of a border wall. And if Donald Trump caves, then they will effectively have done that. Because if they can get him to back down once with no funding for the wall, then how can he ever bring it up again, especially during this Congress? It's not going to happen. So if we're going to have border protection that the people voted for, that the electorate chose, then you're going to have to take up this fight with Congress and take it up now. Why didn't we take it up during the time of the Republicans? Neither know nor care. Can't do anything about that now. Oh, by the way, for those who keep forgetting, see, Trump did promise a wall. And a lot of people don't recognize that it's under construction. But you can go as far back as April of last year. And things were going on even in El Paso, Texas.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions will be in New Mexico today to speak with Southwest border sheriffs about immigration enforcement. The visit comes as crews break ground on a new section of wall along the U.S.-Mexico border, west of El Paso. The 20-mile project is part of President Trump's push to stop drug trafficking and illegal immigration. He has also directed states to deploy National Guard troops. Manuel Bajorquez is near the wall's construction site in Santa Teresa, New Mexico. Manuel, good morning.
Good morning. That is Mexico, just right there. And currently around here, the only thing separating it from the U.S. are these posts, which are designed to stop vehicles, but not necessarily people. That will soon change here outside El Paso, as a new wall that looks more like this will go up. Outside El Paso, Texas, stacks of steel posts are being prepped for what will eventually look like this, an 18 to 30-foot wall spanning 20 miles of the U.S. southern border.
It's going to be durable. It's going to be here for a long time.
U.S. Border Patrol Sector Chief Aaron Hall says it will help block one of the country's busiest smuggling routes. Last year, El Paso Border Patrol agents caught more than 25,000 people crossing the border illegally and seized more than 34,000 pounds of marijuana and 140 pounds of cocaine.
It's going to deter all but the most determined illegal entrants from entering the United States here.
The new wall will have a 5-foot plate at the top to prevent trespassers from climbing over, and the posts will be driven into concrete to keep intruders from digging underneath.
We have to have strong borders. We need the wall.
Congress hasn't approved the estimated $73 million for President Trump's proposed border wall. But last year, the president signed an executive order to use existing money to jumpstart projects. More than 400 National Guard members have arrived since last week to patrol the border.
I think that the rhetoric has been more harmful than helpful.
Republican Mayor of El Paso, Dee Margo, worries stronger enforcement at the border will damage the relationship between the U.S. and Mexico.
You cannot tell the difference between where El Paso ends and Mexico begins. We're really one community and have been for over 400 years.
Critics are also concerned about the wall's environmental impact, but the Border Patrol says it works carefully not to disturb the surrounding natural habitat. The new section of wall is scheduled to be completed next spring. Nora?
All right, Manuel, thank you so much.
So back in April of last year, Donald Trump grabbed money to do 20 miles of wall. There's other wall being built in other places, California, parts of Arizona. Guys, the wall is being built. The media is simply selectively reporting what it needs to have you understand that the wall is opposed by everybody. Even the report I just read, hey, they're building it. Oh, you know, we're a community. We're integrated with it. No, you're Mexico. We are the United States. There is a border, an international border, bisecting this community and separating it by nation. You may want to play political footsie with the Mexicans, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the nation does not support you in that. And the nation is more important than your single community on the border, no matter how long you have been integrated. The United States of America is still the United States of America. It is not integrated with Mexico. It is not part of Mexico. It seeks to have a good partnership with Mexico, but that's a different topic altogether. So this whole dance between Nancy Pelosi and Donald Trump, you already knew how it was going to end. Donald Trump doesn't ever take smack off of anybody without smacking back. He did. He also stood his ground. This is about border security. Now, what is it about for Nancy Pelosi? Well, it's about security. It's about people getting paid. That last one, which she totally controls, almost totally controls. Security, she was told immediately that, oh, we got this. So what is this about for the Democrats? Other than opening the government and silencing this president. And by silencing this president, as I've said over and over again, this has never been about Trump. This has been about the 63 million people who voted for Trump and the more who have joined the ranks of supporters since Donald Trump has done for the economy and for trade and other things like health care by getting rid of the individual mandate in Obamacare and by cutting taxes. He has done the things that he's promised, and the nation has responded positively. They can't have that because it threatens any hold they may ever have on full power of the government over the American people for probably as long as a generation. You don't mess with Donald Trump. You find a way to work around him and keep him quiet. She didn't do that. And now there will more than likely be a State of the Union speech. And I guarantee you she's not going to like to hear one word of it. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', we'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also, WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 FM North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, in the midst of the dance with Nancy Pelosi, or after it pretty much ended, because it came down to Nancy threatened that the State of the Union speech could not be given in a joint session of Congress, and she has every right to do that. But it's a very blatant political move since that hasn't happened ever. And Donald Trump responded by kicking Congress, all of Congress, off any federal aircraft. So you're not flying anywhere until this thing is over. Okay, which one sounds more, just with that, Which one sounds more interested in ending the shutdown? The one who doesn't want a speech to be given, or the one that says nobody should be flying around unless we negotiate this thing? Well, he went a little bit further. On Saturday, Donald Trump made an offer to end the shutdown.
This is a common sense compromise both parties should embrace. The radical left can never control our borders. I will never let it happen. Walls are not immoral. In fact, they are the opposite of immoral because they will save many lives and stop drugs from pouring into our country. Our plan includes the following: $800 million in urgent humanitarian assistance, $805 million for drug detection technology to help secure our ports of entry, an additional 2,750 border agents and law enforcement professionals, 75 new immigration judge teams to reduce the court backlog of, believe it or not, almost 900,000 cases. However, the whole concept of having lengthy trials for anyone who sets one foot in our country unlawfully must be changed by Congress. It is unsustainable. It is ridiculous. Few places in the world would even consider such an impossible nightmare. Our plan includes critical measures to protect migrant children from exploitation and abuse. This includes a new system to allow Central American minors to apply for asylum in their home countries and reform to promote family reunification for unaccompanied children, thousands of whom wind up on our border doorstep. To physically secure our border, the plan includes $5.7 billion for a strategic deployment of physical barriers, or a wall. This is not a 2,000-mile concrete structure from sea to sea. These are steel barriers in high-priority locations. Much of the border is already protected by natural barriers such as mountains and water. We already have many miles of barrier, including 115 miles that we are currently building or under contract. It will be done quickly. Our request will add another 230 miles this year in the areas our border agents most urgently need. It will have an unbelievable impact. If we build a powerful and fully designed see-through steel barrier on our southern border, the crime rate and drug problem in our country would be quickly and greatly reduced. Some say it could be cut in half. Because these criminals, drug smugglers, gangs, and traffickers do not stop at our border. They permeate throughout our country, and they end up in some places where you'd least expect them. They go all over our country. A steel barrier will help us stop illegal immigration while safely directing commerce to our lawful ports of entry. Many of these security ideas have been proposed by Democrats themselves, and all of them have been supported by Democrats in the past, including a physical barrier wall or fence. Furthermore, in order to build the trust and goodwill necessary to begin real immigration reform, there are two more elements to my plan. Number one is 3 years of legislative relief for 700,000 DACA recipients brought here unlawfully by their parents at a young age many years ago. This extension will give them access to work permits, Social Security numbers, and protection from deportation, most importantly. Secondly, our proposal provides a 3-year extension of temporary protected status, or TPS. This means that 300,000 immigrants whose protected status is facing expiration will now have 3 more years of certainty so that Congress can work on a larger immigration deal, which everybody wants, Republicans and Democrats. And our farmers and vineyards won't be affected because lawful and regulated entry into our country will be easy and consistent. That is our plan. Border security, DACA, TPS, and many other things. Straightforward, fair, reasonable, and common sense with lots of compromise, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has pledged to bring this bill to a vote this week in the United States Senate. Our proposal is not intended to solve all of our immigration challenges. This plan solves the immediate crisis, and it is a horrible crisis. It is a humanitarian crisis like we rarely see in our country. And it provides humanitarian relief, delivers real border security, and immediately reopens our federal government. If we are successful in this effort, then we can start the border project of remaking our immigration system for the 21st century.
So, we give 3 years of continued DACA nonsense. I don't like that, but okay, that's a concession. And we give money to people for humanitarian needs, etc., so on, and do all this. But at the end of the day, of course, we still get the money for the wall, because you hold on to that. I give you something, you give me something, right? So what was the Democrat response to this? Well, actually, the response began before he even gave his speech on Saturday, I believe it was. They were rejecting his proposal out of hand. Oh, the president's going to make an announcement where he talks about conditions whereby he would open the government. No, we want him to open the government, then we'll talk. That's basically what was said, and it was followed through on throughout the weekend.
President Donald Trump has backed away from a simple demand for border wall funding. Now he is offering a 3-year extension of programs for refugees and immigrants brought illegally to America as minors, known as Dreamers.
If we are successful in this effort, we will then have the best chance in a very long time at real bipartisan immigration reform.
Democrats demand permanent protections for all Dreamers, not just those who registered in an Obama administration program known as DACA that shielded them from deportation. Key Democrats say Trump's proposal is a non-starter.
We wanted a pathway to citizenship for all Dreamers. He's just taking a small section of that. Those are the DACA recipients, and he's only giving them a temporary stay. If he really wants to work on comprehensive immigration reform, open the government, and then sit down with Democratic leaders to actually work on the stuff that needs to get done.
Last year, Trump moved to terminate the very programs he is now offering to extend and demanding Democrats agree to his terms for doing so. Democratic Senator Chris Murphy tweeted a comparison, quote, "Imagine if a dude drove his truck into your house on purpose and then told you he would fix the hole for $5 billion. What would you say?" For Republicans, Democrats' complete rejection of new physical border barriers is perplexing and hypocritical, since an assortment of barriers went up under both Republican and Democratic administrations in recent decades.
President Clinton built fencing. President H.W. Bush built fencing. President George W. Bush built fencing. President Obama built fencing. This has not been an immoral issue, and the president's been very clear. He's talking about 234 miles of fencing along a 2,000-mile border. It's only in the priority areas.
When Congress reconvenes, the Republican-led Senate and the Democratically-led House of Representatives are both expected to take up funding bills that would be dead on arrival in the other chamber. With Congress deadlocked and the White House showing no signs of surrender, a deal to reopen shuttered federal agencies and pay government workers remains elusive. Michael Bowman, VOA News, Washington.
So again, Donald Trump has done two things. One, by making his proposal, he has appeared to weaken in the eyes of the Democrats and those on the left. See, we're going to crack him. If we just keep the pressure on, he's going to give in. On the other side, Donald Trump, by making this proposal, while still sticking to his core demand of border fencing, or border wall funding for that, has made it very clear to the ears and eyes of anyone else, at least he's willing to talk about something. Well, I want DACA to be, I want full amnesty for DACA. Well, we're not talking about that, but I'll give you 3 years and we can work out the details as part of comprehensive immigration reform, and you have the rest of this Congress and into the next Congress to do that. Let me tell you why the Democrats would reject that. If you remember in September of 2017, when President Trump said, DACA is no more, I give you guys 6 months from now. You have 6 months to work out a deal for DACA, to get it out of the executive order realm and make it law. I give you 6 months. What did Democrats do? They walked away from the Dreamers. They left them hanging. 6 months, 3 years, it's the same to the Democrats. They don't want anything other than their proposal. Their proposal is not about the Dreamers. It is about amnesty. And it's not just for them. It's for anybody who enters the country illegally, because they want to replace the black voters who are committing self-genocide with Latinos and Hispanics who are going to vote Democrat for who knows how long out of gratitude for the public assistance that Democrats have promised them. If you don't believe that, then you don't. But there is no other reason for illegals to be voting in this country, primarily where Democrats hold sway. If you do not think illegals vote in this country, just do a Google search. There are a number of municipalities who make it clear that they welcome people who are what they'll call undocumented. They're not citizens. They welcome the participation in elections of non-citizens. And I haven't seen any place that is run by an organization other than the Democrat Party that supports that. If you really haven't figured out what this is about, and why do they want the government? Well, the only condition, we won't do anything until the government is open. Why? Because you never intended to do anything anyway. It's not that they're looking to negotiate in good faith. They're looking to negotiate not at all. Because as soon as the government is open, they will cease to say anything about border security. Mark my words. If you haven't figured out how Democrats work by now, you're either a white progressive or one of their pets of color. Everyone else knows what's going to happen with this. And that is why we would prefer for Donald Trump to hold the line. Do not give in to Democrats, because Democrats never keep their word. Never. If they bother to give it, they haven't promised anything. They never do. And then once you've made the effort to come across the aisle and work with them, it's like the old Charlie Brown cartoon where he's going to kick the football and there's Lucy holding it, and no matter how many times he decides to trust her, she's going to pull that thing away once he gets there. Always happens. I would like to think Trump is playing a longer game, because when it comes down another month, another 2 months, he can say, I made these offers. We could have resolved some of this throughout this entire Congress and had time to negotiate. But the whole thing is, if Democrats cave on the wall, they know their power has been compromised in a way that they cannot abide. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin'. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us, also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Does anybody remember all the talk of the trade war that Donald Trump was having and how it was going to tear up the U.S. economy, and why would he do such a thing, and it's going to raise the prices sky high for Chinese goods in the U.S.? Did any of that happen? Did it? I remember people were screaming about, oh gosh, he's going after him on aluminum and steel, and that's going to affect the price of a can of beer. Really? I don't hear anybody cry. I don't hear anybody crying about the price of beer. And since inflation was 2.2% in 2018, while wage growth was 3.2% in 2018, I think people are able to afford their cans of beer just fine. So what happened? And of course, the other things were, he really can't mess with China. They own all of our debt. Really? They own less debt now than they owned in 2011. They own about 19% of the total 6.26 trillion that are held by foreign countries. Do you understand what I'm saying? They only own 19% of what's held by foreign governments. They held less than a fifth of that, and the 6.26 trillion, that's not even a third of the national debt. So how much of our debt do they hold? About 6%. Miss me with all this nonsense you guys are talking. Miss me with all this rhetoric you have going on that doesn't mean a bit of, it means absolutely nothing. And oh, by the way, Donald Trump, the Trump administration is looking to lift tariffs on China because of all the tariffs that China has removed on U.S. and other countries' goods. I guess while we were reading letters between Nancy Pelosi and Donald Trump going back and forth, while people were trying to gin up a whole bunch of concern about a government shutdown that's not affecting anybody except a very small proportion of the U.S. workforce, and they're pretty much guaranteed whenever this ends to get all of their pay, and some of them will probably get double pay. Well, it could go on for years. No, it would only go on for years if the Democrats wanted to go on for years. Do they want it to go on for years? The Democrats don't care how long this shutdown lasts, as long as they can open up the government without funding the wall. To be honest with you, the best thing that could happen is that the Democrats are exposed for what they are, hypocrites and liars, and we go all the way to November 2020 and they get thrown out of power, and then we won't have to worry about this nonsense anymore. If it goes on that long, that would be unfortunate, but not for the American people. Back to China. We were supposed to be in so much trouble because of what China could do to us, and all they've done is lower their tariffs over and over again on cars, on grain, on everything else. And then this Friday, we had this interesting thing show up on ccn.com. Bye-bye trade war? China plans a $1 trillion buying spree to reduce U.S. trade deficit. You heard that correctly. 1 trillion. Trillion. With a T. Are you hearing that? They're going to buy $1 trillion of U.S. goods. Let's get some more out of this article here. China has extended the olive branch back to the United States by offering a path to eliminate Washington's burgeoning trade deficit with the country. This was reported by Bloomberg on Friday. The news comes less than a day after the Wall Street Journal reported that the Trump administration was considering lifting tariffs amid the ongoing trade war. They keep calling it a trade war. China is proposing a 6-year buying spree. Citing sources familiar with the matter, Bloomberg reported that China has offered to significantly boost the purchase of U.S. goods over a 6-year period in an effort to rebalance trade between the two superpowers. Do you know what that means? By increasing its annual imports from the United States, Beijing would reduce its trade surplus to zero. Zero. That would require a spending boost of more than $1 trillion. Now, last year, the trade surplus with Beijing's trade surplus with the U.S. or our trade deficit with China was $323 billion. They intend to reduce that to zero. And they're going to do it by spending $1 trillion worth of Chinese currency to buy U.S. goods. Do you know that means that's the equivalent of having every man, woman, and child in China pull up to an American cash register with about $750 to spend? And they're just buying whatever they want. So, how come I'm not hearing about this in the... Huh? Why am I not hearing about this? Can somebody tell me? Because the fake news media, worldwide, actually, they have been pushing the Trump started trade war that the U.S. can't win nonsense from the minute that 45 said boo to China about its tariffs. And the white progressives, along with their pensive colors, they have been rehearsing ad nauseum how terrible a trade war would be for American workers, for farmers, for manufacturers. And now apparently you can stick a fork in that nonsense. It is done. China has said, in the tradition of Roberto Duran, no mas. They want out of it. They want out of it. They want to spend more than $1 trillion to basically balance the scales. That's ridiculous. Let me tell you what's fascinating about this to me. Some of you will remember how China treated the last president. There were military confrontations, flybys and things of that nature going on in the Pacific Ocean near China, or China would buzz U.S. ships. And the last time Barack Obama went to China, he was not allowed to deplane from his normal exit on Air Force One. They made him exit out of the back of his own aircraft. And there was quite a scene on the tarmac as they did that. No, he can't come out here. What do you mean? He's the president of the United States. I don't care who he is. He ain't coming out here. Made him come out of the back of his own plane. But with the current president, China released one of the ball boys when he was while he was at UCLA. He and two other black freshman basketball players were caught shoplifting in China, about as dumb as you come. And Donald Trump asked the president of China to intervene. And the president of China, instead of allowing those three young black men to go to jail in China for thievery, which they very well could have done, they were allowed to come home. I can guarantee you, had President Obama asked that, the path would have been much more difficult, because China has no respect for Barack Obama. None. Building on that relationship, China now wants a flood of American products in its country in exchange for a flood of Chinese cash in our country. So, I guess when they say elections have consequences, this is kind of what we're talking about. So, while over here the only thing we're hearing about in the news is an impeachment that's, well, not really likely to occur, although the longer the shutdown goes, I'm sure the Democrats will try it, but it's still unlikely to occur. And if it occurs, it won't even matter, because no one's removing Trump. There'd be outrage. Everybody in Congress would be sent home in the next election. A government shutdown that most folks really aren't paying attention to because it doesn't affect them. It doesn't affect them. But that's all you're hearing about in the news. Oh, the shutdown and all the pain and all the suffering. This is inside Beltway. This is inside the Beltway stuff. The pain is there. The pain is not outside the Beltway, to be honest with you. And the pain can be eliminated by those inside the Beltway anytime Nancy Pelosi wanted to go away. She doesn't. Threats of no State of the Union speech and Donald Trump pimp slapping all of Congress off of federal aircraft. That's all you're getting. You're not hearing about something that actually matters to the American people. $1 trillion worth of Chinese currency is coming into this country over the next 5 to 6 years to buy American goods. $1 trillion. So we're already looking at an economy that's doing extremely well. What do you think is going to happen to an economy that then gets a massive influx of foreign cash for its manufactured products and its goods and other goods and services? Is that going to help the average American worker and wage earner, or is it going to hurt him? What do you think? So why aren't we talking about this? Because the only thing the Democrats and the press that supports them wants is control of the government so a globalist agenda can be forced upon the American people. And something like this might convince somebody else that maybe what Trump is up to is better for them than anything coming out of Nancy Pelosi's mouth, of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's mouth, out of Liwatha Elizabeth Warren's mouth. It really isn't all that complicated. If you want this thing to work out in your favor, the last thing you do is give in to Democrats. Any president could have done this, including the last one. But you have to have an American first mentality, or America first mentality, in order to pull it off. And you have to have an understanding of what the other country's economy needs, because China's economy is in trouble, folks. China's economy is in so much trouble that they think it's going to have an effect on the global economic outlook. They're doing this, and Trump is actually helping them. This is a way to address some of their problems while helping America at the same time. So it's interesting to me that Donald Trump, the self-described stable genius, can be pimp-slapping Nancy Pelosi and all of Congress around at the same time, working out deals abroad for the United States that benefit the American worker and the American business. Wow. I'm going to turn this over to my good friend, Ron Edwards, and then we'll be back with Hour 2 of Black Man Thinking.
America's founding fathers warned against getting the United States entangled in foreign conflicts. Hello, I'm Ron Edwards. On today's page from the Edwards Notebook, since around 625 AD, Muslim factions have been slaughtering each other and planning a worldwide caliphate. For many years, America has been battling in Afghanistan, Syria, and Iraq. It used to be that our mighty armed forces fought to totally defeat enemies. But ever since the kooky concept of rules of engagement, our military heroes have been hampered from fully engaging and defeating adversaries. It should not be difficult to understand that no enemy is defeated until they cannot fight back or start up again once you back off. ISIS has been reduced, but not yet defeated. Currently, there are 30,000 ISIS terrorists with about $450 million left to buy more armaments. I agree with President Trump that our great soldiers should come home, but first, they should be allowed to fully engage the enemy and light them up until they fully surrender or meet their maker. Our military has the skill set to get the job done quickly, if unleashed, without any foolish PC impediments. May God bless our military heroes and our republic. I'm Ron Edwards. Join me Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific on AmericaMatters.us and 12 a.m. Sundays on Talk America Radio Network.
Sponsored by the Tri-County Liberty Coalition.
I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it's made to you during election time, and you're dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problems. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy with Hour 2 of Black Man Thinkin here on the dominant force of Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, for those who may not be aware, during the March for Life in D.C. this weekend, an incident occurred between a group of mostly white teenagers from a Catholic high school known as Covington. So it's Covington Catholic High School. They were in D.C. for the march. And they were confronted by some people, and then they ended up being confronted by an old Indian guy beating a hand drum. And some selectively edited video got out that definitely made it appear that the young white men and the one who was standing directly in front of the Indian gentleman, he was wearing a Make America Great Again hat, so you know that was totally insensitive and totally terrible. They made it look as though these white teenagers were instigating something against this Indian and mocking him and doing all this other stuff. Well, I went out and watched the video, and that's a bald-faced lie. I watched the longer videos, the unedited, the less edited versions. And so did a bunch of other people. You started out with condemnation, almost universal condemnation of the white young men, saying, how could they do this? They're being disrespectful, they're being rude, they're being obnoxious. Yeah. Nobody said anything about the black Muslims and the Hebrew, the black Israelite contingent that was there mocking the white kids for being white. Saying that, you know, their parents gave them everything, and say, you know what, the fact that white people have parents, and in the black community that's not as much the case, and in the white community parents are more likely to be married, not always, but more likely to be married and to stay married, and it's been demonstrated through many studies, if you want to avoid poverty, which means you might have more things to provide to your children, then you should marry before you have them and stay married, and you're less likely to be poor, which means you're less likely to have things to give to your children. Now, the black community has forgotten this. And so now we have folks out there trying to make themselves Israelites. That part got left out of the edited version of the video. The other part that got left out of the edited versions of the video was the fact that these white young men never approached anyone. They were by themselves chanting and cheering when they were confronted by the group of African American, I hate that term, these are black Muslims. That's all they were. These black guys come up and they start talking smack to them. And after a while they did what teenage young men are going to do. You're going to talk enough smack to me, you're going to hear it back. Doesn't matter what color you are, there's only so much smack that you're going to listen to as a teenage kid. You're going to say something, particularly when you're with your group. We're not going to put up with this. So, okay, the smack talk returns. While all this is going on, some old Indian guy just walks up on the group beating a hand drum and walks right up to this one guy and just stands in his face beating this drum. And the kid, to his credit, he doesn't mock, he doesn't catcall, he doesn't say a word. He stands there silently, stares the guy down, just looks at him, and after a while he smiled because all of his guys were around him, chanting and talking in his ear and everything, and it brought a smile to his face. He wasn't intimidated. He wasn't disrespectful. He showed no rancor. And he didn't back down. Now, of course, let me make this clear. In the America that we need to change, that young man's behavior is inexcusable. In the America that we want to change, white people cannot stand up for them, particularly not white males, and particularly not young white males who may come from intact nuclear families. They can never stand up for themselves. They must always assume the mantle that in any confrontation they must be wrong. Well, apparently other people have gotten hold of this information, and they have a different view as well, because the Gateway Pundit, of all places, after round condemnation of these young men, including having the archdiocese associated with their high school saying that, well, we may have to expel these students for their disrespectful and terrible behavior. I don't know if they've rescinded any of that yet, but according to the Gateway Pundit, apologies to Covington Catholic students flood Twitter after video shows teens were framed. And someone with a quote that he got duped by fake news. Social media erupted Saturday after selectively edited videos of Covington Catholic students were posted to Twitter accusing them of harassing and mocking an elderly Native American man. The left, along with their mouthpieces in the media, immediately called for these teens to be tarred and feathered. But here are the cold hard facts about what really happened at the Lincoln Memorial this weekend. That's where the confrontation occurred. According to one of the high school boys who was present, a group of black men were taunting the Trump supporters, calling them shooters and crackers, and said the white kids had everything given to them by their parents. Okay. At first, the Trump-supporting teams ignored the black men who were harassing them, but after the blacks continued to taunt, the white kids began to chant back at them. According to a witness, it was at this point that a Native American man showed up, quote, out of nowhere, end quote, and began drumming in the high school kids' face. Why didn't he walk over to the black kids? Because they were involved. I mean, it was a two-way thing. Why did he? You want to know why? Because nobody wants to deal with black young men, including black people. He knows what reception he would have received from black young men. Get that drum out my face, and whatever he would have wanted to call him after that. So he went the path of least resistance. He went over to the white kid, who knows in this day and time he can't respond. Quote from one of the witnesses, "We weren't even chanting at him. We were chanting at the African American guy, but obviously social media made us look bad to get views and stuff." Wow. A video posted to Facebook shows the beginning of the incident. The students are off by themselves doing school cheers when Phillips and his fellow Native American activists, they're activists. Really? Why are they there? Walk over to them. They walk over to them beating drums and chanting, and they come up in the student space. Another clip shows a Native American man telling one of the students, "White people, go back to Europe. This is not your land." These Covington Catholic students showed incredible restraint after being ambushed and taunted. No crimes were committed. Nobody got hands laid on them. And no one became violent, yet the media is piling on these guys and calling for them to be severely punished. And you can't find anything that they did wrong. I'm looking at people on social media and responding to this, and let me make this clear. I'm ashamed of black people with this. Ashamed. And not because they're not condemning the black kids or young men who were there taunting these white kids. I'm ashamed that they can't look objectively at something and say, man, nothing happened here. Move along. But I have black people, particularly black females, and females in general, to be honest. These white kids were so disrespectful, and they... Get out of here with that nonsense. They are there. Well, they're wearing Trump memorabilia. So? You didn't say anything about the folks on the with different skin tones wearing red, black, and green beanies and caps and stuff, did you? You didn't have anything to say. What's a dude doing up in the Capitol with a hand drum beating on it in the face of somebody else? You know what? Had that been a white dude, say a white dude who's a Celt coming over from the British Isles, I guess they were Scottish or whoever the Celts are, and they have drums too. If he had showed up beating a drum in somebody's face, you would have said that dude was wrong. Why is this guy right? He's not. No one touched him. Mocked him? No one mocked him. Well, the kid was disrespectful. He stood his ground and looked at him. And then, in the same silence in which he stood his ground and looked at him, he just turned and walked away. The understanding I have is that a chaperone called all the kids out, because they did seem to be a mass exodus. All the white kids, all the Covington Catholic school kids went someplace else, apparently for a photo op. So all the people saying, where are the chaperones? How come they're not intervening in what? Intervening in what? I said this over and over again, and sometimes I get tired of saying it, sometimes I do, but not often. Part of the beauty of the Trump victory in 2016 is that it gave Caucasian Americans the green light for them to speak their mind. And it is needed, because all we're hearing most of the time is a bunch of what I call progressivism and Knee-Grosity. And Knee-Grosity, for those who do not understand the term, is just progressivism in blackface. Just the same way that a womanist ain't nothing but a black feminist, a Negro, KNEE-GROW, is nothing but a black progressive. Now, we can let white progressives and their colored pets, they can say anything they want about anyone they want. And as Winston Churchill once said, a lie will get halfway around the truth, halfway around the world before the truth can get its trousers on. And that's exactly what happened to these kids. The lie made it all the way back home and had them on the carpet about to get expelled before the truth finally shows up, and we'll see whether or not the truth will set them free. But I'm ashamed of black people, because the same type of consideration that you would want in a situation where doubt existed, you won't extend to anyone else. I looked at the video and I looked at that white American teenager with American pride. He stood in a tense situation, confronted by total strangers, stood his ground, was respectful, was quiet, and then just walked away. I'm proud of him. I don't have an issue with him. I don't have a problem with him. What I do have a problem with is people now using video that under the auspices, under the pretension that the camera doesn't lie. No, the camera doesn't lie, but the people who film do. They edit. They lie by editing. They lie by cropping. They lie by giving you a narrative before they show the footage and after the footage is over. That doesn't tell the whole story. The camera doesn't blink, but the camera can't make you see everything it saw. That's up to the person who's holding the device. And what we have is a lack of truth here. I want to finish up repeating this point, because it's necessary for America to be great again. America is 65 to 70% white people. Their voice should never be silenced. They should be able to speak their mind as freely and say as many crazy things as black people are allowed to say, talking about reparations and saying that racism is holding them back, which is ridiculous. It's not. Racism has held them back, but racism is no longer the reason they're failing. That's not the reason. The reasons for black failure and black underachievement exist in the black quote-unquote community now. And they can be solved by black people if they were willing to do so. So far they're not. So these kids from Covington High School, Covington Catholic School, went and expressed themselves at the March for Life, as they should have, stood up against abortion, which is a great thing, stood their ground against activists of color, and did no harm to anyone, and represented their position with resolve, with respect. Well, they weren't respectful? Oh no, you don't get it. If all I do is tell you you're wrong, you're not being disrespected. You're being countered. And they deserve to be applauded for what they've done. And maybe the fact that the Twitterverse, after seeing what really occurred, has decided that maybe these kids should not be vilified after all, is a sign that we're finally willing to allow white people to have the same freedom of speech as we want to give folks like Colin Kaepernick. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM, Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 FM, North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, there's an interesting dynamic going on, which I think is good for the country at large and particularly good for a particular demographic. And that demographic would be Hispanic Americans or Latinos. For those who do not know, my wife is Latino. She is Mexican. I say that because it's relevant. Anyway, this particular thing began all the way back on election night in November of 2016, when it was expected that Donald Trump was going to be buried by a lack of support from Hispanic voters, which is a cherished and highly sought after, highly coveted group of voters by the Democrat Party.
One of the big questions for Democrats tonight is what happened to the Latino vote that was supposed to bury a Trump campaign, promising much tougher immigration laws. Correspondent Steve Harrigan looks for answers tonight in Miami.
We will build the wall. Don't worry. We will build the wall.
Donald Trump called Mexicans rapists, promised to build a wall and deport undocumented immigrants. And yet 29% of Hispanics nationally voted for Trump, 2% more than voted for Mitt Romney 4 years ago, according to Fox News exit polls.
It's a new day in America. It's a great day.
I'm thrilled. I'm very happy.
I knew it was going to be a hard race, but I was excited about the policies that Trump would talk about, and I'm happy about the outcome.
I love you, Trump.
In battleground Florida, for example, younger Cubans who favor openness with the Castro regime were expected to join newly arrived Puerto Rican professionals to deliver the state's 29 electoral votes to the Democrats, a, quote, checkmate that could eliminate any path for Republican victory. But somehow in the ballot box, that failed to materialize.
When people get into the ballot box, they're going to be alone, and they're going to be alone with their partisanship, and they're going to vote their partisanship.
At the same time, President Obama was legalizing the purchase of Cuban rum and cigars.
Should not prop up the Cuban regime.
Donald Trump was meeting with veterans of the failed Bay of Pigs invasion. Trump won the Cuban vote by 13%. His courting of older Cubans who have long been seen as a disciplined conservative voting bloc paid off. While Trump lost the Florida Hispanic vote, he did so here by a much smaller margin than nationally. Keeping the Hispanic vote close enabled Trump to carry the must-win swing state by just 1.4%.
The real surge in Florida came from white voters in places like the Tampa suburbs, where turnout this time around was 3 times as high as it was just 4 years ago. Brett?
Steve Harrigan in Miami. Steve, thank you.
Donald Trump carried the state of Florida not by winning the Hispanic vote, but by reducing its impact and carrying certain parts of it, and also because of a turnout by white voters. I'm going to put that second one aside. That's a whole other topic and segment, but 29% voted for Trump nationally versus 27% who voted for Mitt Romney 4 years earlier. That was at that time. And you have to remember, if you got 29% of the vote, then it seems like 71% went to Hillary Clinton, and you got to still say that that's a big deal. But when you consider or contrast that with the captive voting bloc that Democrats have, the black community, which will vote 90-something% Democrat, 71 just doesn't seem quite as high. Now, let's fast forward to June, July of last year. And all of a sudden, or so it would seem all of a sudden, the support among Hispanics for Trump went up a little bit more.
Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin. This is Levin TV on BlazeTV.com. And by the way, for many of you, your subscription.
The month of June wasn't too good for the White House in the court of public opinion. Lots of media raked Trump over the coals for the treatment of migrant families along the U.S. border. Now, in the denunciation of the Donald, Latino Americans took center stage.
We saw the president just a few moments ago on Twitter tweeting again that this was the Democrats' fault and not acknowledging at all that he has the ability to stop it with perhaps just a phone call.
It's not right, it's immoral, it's inhumane, and we need to stop that.
And we've known since Donald Trump came down those stairs calling Mexicans rapists and criminals, we've known that we as American citizens would be on watch. But according to a Harvard-Harris poll, 35% of Americans who identify as Hispanic either approve or somewhat approve of the Trump administration's policies. Now, that survey was conducted after Trump signed an executive order ending the separation of illegal migrant families. Back in May, those numbers were only 25%. Can a single executive order really explain a spike in approval this high? Now, 57% of Hispanic Americans, according to another poll, approve of Donald Trump's economic policies. We decided to speak to some folks in the local Latino community to see if they can explain these poll numbers.
Have no explanation. Definitely not my kind of people.
I think it's because people listen to Donald Trump and they believe what he says.
It makes no sense at all because it's mostly Hispanics at the border that are being denied entry with their children, so can't speak for them.
Do you think maybe there's other issues that are important to them?
I think that they're probably unaware of exactly what's going on, as most of us are.
What would be some reason that people in Hispanic communities would support Trump? I mean, what possible reason could there be?
I guess. I mean, he's smart financially.
I'm not sure about his reaction, perhaps, because I think he did say, and his wife did say that, that they do want to connect the families again, and they want to make a civilized process.
Yes, there's a lot of pros and cons, but still, overall, he wants to make America great again.
Now, the media is very good at telling us how we should be feeling. However, a more nuanced look at the data can sometimes throw up some surprising results. Caleb Maupin, RT, New York.
Okay, from 29% on election night to 35% after slipping down to 25%, up to 35% in June of 2018. At the height, it would seem, of the border crisis with families and separations and things of that nature, 35% supporting Trump, 57% supporting his economic policies. Okay. But that still leaves 65% who aren't in the Donald Trump camp. Or so he thought. The American Thinker looked at a PBS poll, and it says that, well, PBS thought it had a good one, a poll showing the public opposed to the government shutdown and disapproving of President Trump. That is the current media narrative. It was a poll, like many other of their polls, negative to Trump, and a clear attempt to influence the narrative repeated by most of the Beltway press and its talking heads. It might have run and gone without mention, except that Mediaite went deep into the weeds of reading the actual poll line by line and found something eye-popping. Shock poll. Trump gains 19 points with Latino voters during the border wall shutdown. Let me say that again slowly. Trump gains 19 percentage points with Latino voters during the border wall shutdown. So what is that saying? You see, in early November, because we just went from 35, it had slipped back down to 31%. There was a poll, NPR PBS poll, that had Trump approval rating at 31%. This is still creeping up from where we were at election time, though. But the poll released this past Thursday showed the president's job approval among Latino adults at, wait for it, 50%. It's a coin flip now. So you went from believing that the Latino voters were going to be the ones who buried Donald Trump to them not putting enough fuel in your tank to even defeat Donald Trump. And now to the point where his support among them is as strong as any among the Democrats. See, this ain't good for nobody in the donkey party. Because the press, during the shutdown, they've worked tirelessly to unearth any human interest or sob story that they could to convince a nation that really isn't missing 25% of the federal government that the sky is falling. Well, they're not buying it. An accompanying narrative sees voters growing angry with Trump regarding the Trump shutdown, implying that the lack of support is going to force him to cave into the Democrats with nothing to show for standing up for a border wall. But then you see 19% growth in Latino support. Wow. And now, but of course you have the flies in that ointment for those narratives. One is the vast majority of Americans, they're really not paying attention to the shutdown. It doesn't affect them. And then you also have the federal workers who publicly support what Democrats oppose, which is the wall, even though it means that a fair number of them are going to go without pay. You may remember that Donald Trump had a news conference recently where he brought out members of the Border Patrol to publicly express their support for the border wall and a shutdown in order to get it. Let me tell you something about Hispanics and the government. 9%, less than 9% of the federal workforce are Hispanic. But they are 22%, just under 22% of Department of Homeland Security staff. And they're more than half of Border Patrol agents. Let that sink in, and then go back to that PBS poll. During the shutdown, 19% growth, bringing Trump to 50% approval among Latino adults. So what we're saying about that poll is the American demographic who best understands illegal immigration, they're most affected, arguably, by illegal immigration, and happen to be 51% of federal workers on the Border Patrol, they support a guy who wants a wall on the southern border. Somehow, I just doubt those things are coincidence. What's going on? Well, the shutdown should make him unpopular. Yeah, but record low unemployment among Hispanics and Latinos is not going to dump anybody's popularity. You got to understand this. Hispanics and Latinos come to America largely to work because that's what they believe is the best path forward for themselves and their families. They prefer work over public assistance. And Trump's economy is putting them to work. Now, the Democrats, of course, are offering all kinds of payments to people, money for nothing apparently, as an incentive to illegal aliens seeking to buy political support with other people's money. But Hispanics would rather earn their own money. So the Democrats are working against the group's cultural inclination and finding that it may not be a very politically endearing tactic. But that's how the donkey party recruits. Another point, La Familia, family, is paramount to Hispanics and Latinos. And I know those two terms are interchangeable, but not always. Providing for family is why many Hispanics and Latinos are willing to violate U.S. sovereignty in the first place. And unfortunately, the current U.S. immigration environment of lax border control, uneven enforcement, and under-the-table employment can encourage these same people to see the American way as detrimental to their families if it's followed, rather than supportive of their families if embraced. That's the reason you need to clean up immigration for people coming from the South. The American way needs to be seen as something that supports their idea of family, and it can be. Now, Trump would support, and he wants a different immigration environment, one that consistently rewards people for respecting U.S. law and for embracing American values. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are okay with the status quo, which does neither. Here's where it really gets interesting. See, the donkey party, they would, given the opportunity, and this is what they're working for, they would make of Hispanics and Latinos what they have made of blacks over the last half century. A destroyed group with almost no family ethic, a community, and I put that in air quotes, desirous of government assistance to address any issue that they have, and a loyal voting bloc with eyes for no other political party. That's what they want to do to Hispanics. It's what they've done to blacks, and it kind of explains why Democrats, who duped Reagan into amnesty back in 1986, continue to advocate so strongly for the illegal aliens they've renamed undocumented migrants. The donkey party is now moving away from blacks. For those who haven't noticed, the reason is simple. It's wrung nearly all of the good out of them. And now, as anyone could have predicted, the self-genocidal aftermath of decades of war on poverty policies, which break up families, which denigrate men. Now, blacks are the most homicidal, most abortive, least family-oriented, highest producers of illegitimate children. It's a mess compared to other groups. It's an absolute mess. And as a result of that mess, black population numbers really aren't growing fast at all with respect to others in this country. As a result of that, the Democrats need a fresh political kill, and that's going to be the Hispanic community, the Latinos. But they've got a problem with Hispanics who like to work, and who love their families. And now they're aligning with Donald Trump. See, Hispanics today remind me of blacks in the early 1960s, hardworking, family-oriented people, religious. My prayer is that they learn from the example of blacks and not allow the Democrat Party to visit the same destruction upon them. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also, WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Final segment of the show. This is something that I find very painful, and it goes on the heels of what I just spoke of as a warning to Hispanic and Latinos in America regarding the Democrat Party. The New York Post ran a story on December 29th, 2018 regarding legislators in the state of New York. And it headlined, "Legislators spent big on lavish fundraisers but gave no grants to students." A nonprofit run by New York State lawmakers to raise scholarship money for needy minority students spends most of the cash on its lavish annual party, including $6,000 on limos, and has given no grants to students for the last 2 years. The New York State Association of Black and Puerto Rican Legislators, so guess what? This is already starting to creep into your community, my Latino brothers. Hermanos, the donkey party is bad. Don't let them among your people. If they're among your people, get them out. The New York State Association of Black and Puerto Rican Legislators organizes what they call a caucus weekend, which is a series of workshops, concerts, and parties in Albany every February, for minority members of the Assembly and the Senate. The group charges sponsors up to $50,000 for a chance to party with lawmakers at events that have included Grammy Award-winning rappers and high-profile speakers like Clinton and Jesse Jackson. The President's Day weekend bash is capped off by a swanky black-tie scholarship gala where participants are reminded that they are changing lives one scholarship at a time. But in the last 2 years, there has been no cash for scholarships, according to two sources, a former lawmaker and a community organizer who has relied on the money for needy students since just after the group was founded in 1985. Federal tax filings confirm that in the 2015-2016 fiscal year, which ended September 30th of 2016, the group gave out no educational grants, despite raking in contributions totaling more than $500,000. "I don't know what happened," said Assemblyman Gary Pretlow, a Westchester Democrat and the longtime treasurer of the group. "I'll just sign the checks they give me to sign." If that's not an Amos and Andy step and fetch it answer, I don't know what is. Now, while the students went without scholarships, the lawmakers at the caucus weekend for 2016, they spent $128,000 on food service, $36,500 on music, and more than $56,000 on equipment rental. No money for students. The group failed to furnish the Post with the subsequent tax year's filings, which would have gone through from October of 2016 to September of 2017, despite a federal law requiring it to do so. Oh, by the way, they had their charitable status temporarily revoked in 2011 by the IRS after it failed to file taxes for 3 consecutive years. When asked why the group had not given out any money to students in either year, even though scholarships are the heart of its stated mission, the lawmakers who manage the nonprofit refused to answer. The group is chaired by a president who serves a 2-year term. Now, the current chair of the board, Assemblyman Latrice Walker, she said through a spokesman that she does not have any knowledge of the matter. Oh, really? You're running the thing and you don't know what's going on. State Senator Leroy Comrie, a Queens Democrat and second-ranking board executive, did not return phone calls and emails that wouldn't come out of his St. Albans district office when a reporter visited. Queens Assemblywoman Michelle Titus did not return messages seeking comment. You really have to understand what's going on here. These people are evil. Let's go back to the 2015 tax year where they gathered nearly $565,000 in contributions and gave out a paltry $35,745 in scholarships. In 2014, they took in more money, $580,000, and only gave out $32,000 in scholarships. But they partied, spending thousands on food, entertainment, speakers, and even as much as $3,000 on preachers. When people ask me what I mean by Knee-Grosity, 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 this is what I'm talking about. Black elected officials who rape their own people while criticizing others for not helping the people that they violate. It's obscene what they do. Felony stupid black voters who'd scream bloody murder if the white man kept a dime out of a $10 bill of some government program for their community. But these same idiots eagerly re-elect skin folk who take that $10 bill without giving them a dime. Let me be very crystal clear about this. I love black people. I hate Negroes. And when I say Negroes, I mean KNEE-GROWS, who are nothing other than pets, colored pets of white progressives. Every ideology, everything they believe is something you could have found in Berkeley back in the 1960s and was used by some LSD using white boy who was trying to get between some black girl's legs and probably succeeded. They don't have an understanding of what it is to be black. They don't care what it means to be black. They have squandered and they have soiled and violated and terribly, terribly ruined the legacy of the civil rights movement. And I'm not a big proponent of the movement as some type of historical thing. For me, the movement is simply this. There was a group of Americans who were not being treated as Americans, and for a time they stood up with the moral authority of a belief in God and a respect for the Declaration of Independence, not the Constitution, and said, if we are American, we submit ourselves to you to be treated as Americans. Even adopting the nonviolent principles of Gandhi that got many of them terribly harmed, but they prevailed. You are not going to convince me that Medgar Evers took a bullet so that a bunch of Negroes in New York could party down and listen to Hillary Clinton talk. You're not going to convince me of that. You're not going to convince me that Martin Luther King got blown away so that Jesse Jackson, whose questionable behavior in the aftermath of that shooting, could be rewarded with a speaking fee in New York State. I'm not believing that. You're not going to tell me that all those people showed up at the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma so that black women could kill more unborn children than anybody else per capita in America. Nobody got on the freedom buses so that black people could be the most criminally violent per capita group in America. Nobody got on a Montgomery bus boycott and walked to work or tried to get their cars together so they could shuttle people back and forth for blacks to produce the most bastard children in America. 77.3% of black children in America are born bastards. Nobody marched for that. Nobody went door to door registering somebody to vote so that that's how you could behave 50 years later. That's not how it went down. But you sold yourself out to the Democrat Party. And for that, I cannot forgive. I do not forgive. I do not forgive that we did not have 48.8% of black women in 1960 walking around with genital herpes, but that's what the CDC says we have today. We did not have blacks at 13% of the population in the 1960s committing 45% or more than 40% of all U.S. homicides, according to the FBI. It didn't go down like that. We didn't have it that way. Were we perfect? Of course not. Were we good? That's a matter of opinion. But were we better than this? Unquestioned. What happened? I'll make it real clear to you. White Democrats who never cared for black people listened to the words of one LBJ who said, these Negroes, they're getting uppity. And that's a problem for us because they have something now they haven't had before. The political backing to support their uppityness. And we got to do something. We got to give them a little something. Enough to make them quiet, but not enough to make a difference. So they gave you 2 flavors of the Civil Rights Act. They gave you a Voting Rights Act. And they gave you an affirmative action executive order. And you haven't mattered a hill of beans since, black people. You haven't had a single accomplishment of note since the Johnson administration. You haven't advanced. As a matter of fact, you've gone backwards. How did you go backwards? Somehow, while nobody else's women seem to do this at the rate that ours would, our women traded black men in the home for Uncle Sam's check instead. And they moved or removed the black man from the head of the black family. This is why I despise the Democrat Party. And they kept reinforcing it with more and more ways to put other people's money in black women's hands and endorse into them that black men could not care for them, but the federal government would care for them as long as they kept the black man away from black children, his children. And for this, I despise the Democrat Party. And I have no respect for those who call themselves black but are not, who continue to vote for them, who continue to carry water for them, politically support them, and badmouth anybody who doesn't agree with them. I have no respect. And anybody who's encountered me on social media knows I have no respect for you if you're a Democrat. None. Because no one has hated black people more in this country in my lifetime than the Democrat Party. And that hatred continues, and now they have totally co-opted black people, like these Negroes up in New York, to take advantage of their own people and lie to them when they could help them instead. This is why I give a warning to Hispanics and Latinos. What they have done to black people, what they have done to folks who look like me, the Democrats are eager to do to you. And I mean eager. They will not hesitate to try to break up your families. They will not hesitate to put a government program wherever a group of families or just a group of men should be. They will always seek to denigrate your men. Always. You'll find another Hillary Clinton out there who says that Hispanic men are super predators who need to be brought to heel. Just give them time. You'll find a politician on the Democrat side who'll say that. And you're already seeing your marriage rates drop, and you're already seeing your abortion rates climb, and lack of marriage. And if you don't get in there with the values that you brought from your countries and your cultures to America and say no, they will compromise you just like they've compromised black people. I hate the Democrat Party and will never have or entertain any other feelings about it. And that is why. And that's our show. God bless you. May God keep you. And until next week, do take care.
You've been listening to Black Man Thinkin' with your host, Stan Levy. Join Stan midnight to 2 a.m. That's late Monday night into early Tuesday morning. And find him on the web at Black Man Thinkin' without the G. That's blackmanthinkin.com.